Yukon is now whole. How their depth has been a long time coming. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the Yukon Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, here's a quick update on our program. The show is growing incredibly fast, but it's thanks to you, the fans, and my everydayers, those who value the quality UConn content we're putting out, and we're only getting started. We're also the only daily UConn podcast covering both the men's and women's basketball, as well as a little bit of football. And we're growing every day. But we're also the only podcast that donates to NIL. So by supporting Bleeding Blue for Good and by supporting us, you're indirectly supporting UConn's NIL initiatives and their athletes. We're also proud to give back by donating 10% of all of our revenue to the Husky Ticket Project. It's an initiative that I love, helping send kids to UConn games, both on the men's and women's side, and to the football games. And I'm sure others as well, baseball and whatnot, rocking the baseball hat. So if you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to subscribe and follow wherever you listen. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. For years, UConn women's basketball has been defined by its ability to adapt and dominate, even when the odds were against them. Over the last 3 or 4 years, however, depth has been an elusive luxury. Injuries decimated the Huskies, leaving Geno Auriemma with an incredibly short bench that forced starters to grind out nearly every game without much relief. It wasn't uncommon to see Paige Bueckers or other stars logging 40 minutes a night when she was healthy, game after game, just to keep the team afloat. But this season, things feel different. You can see it already. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, the Huskies are deep, truly deep. And UConn's game against Fairleigh Dickinson, none of the starters played more than 25 minutes. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to read that again. None of the starters played more than 25 minutes. Let that sink in. Paige Bueckers, the face of the program, best player in the country, spent the entire fourth quarter on the bench. Nice luxury to have. And not because of foul trouble or because the Huskies didn't need, her to be out there. It's because they didn't need her. Geno Auriemma has options. And that changes a whole lot. Geno Auriemma has famously said, if you give me 5 healthy bodies, I'll get to the Final Four. What do we do when you have 10 or 11? The newfound depth isn't just about resting players like Bueckers or Azzi Fudd. It's about strategic flexibility. UConn can now mix and match lineups, experience with combinations, and bring in fresh legs without a massive drop-off in quality. Players like Sarah Strong, incredible. Ashlyn Shade, doing her best to step up, are all super impactful contributors, starting and off the bench. Ice Brady, after missing last season, most of the first season with a knee injury, is back and making her presence felt in the paint. And then there's Jana Elfie, the redshirt freshman, who is proving to be a difference maker early in the season, albeit one that is very tough to gauge because Jana herself, you can just see it. You can see, we talked about this, Geno is incredibly tough on her because he sees that potential. So he gives her a shot, and if she doesn't play well, she sits down. What's the famous Bobby Knight line? The best deterrent to a better play is people on the bench. I won't say the entire phrase because it's a family-friendly program. But if you want, you can go look that up. Geno himself acknowledged how much this depth means to the program, saying, quote, "We have options that we haven't had in a while. I like to think we have players coming off the bench that can impact the game differently than the players on the court at the time. And this kind of team that can wear opponents down really can outlast them and dominate late in the game because of their ability to rotate players and effectively take them out." Now, what does that all mean? It just means that we take their legs from out front of them. So when we're playing these better teams that we're going to talk about here in a second, come fourth quarter, it's like deep water. You get somebody out to deep water and they're having to tread, and eventually they get tired and they drown. And so that's what this team does. It keeps them fresh, keeps their team fresh, and it keeps the other team trying to keep up with them. This newfound depth will be absolutely crucial as the season progresses because, let's face it, this December slate is rough. Notre Dame, Louisville, Iowa State, USC. Having a reliable bench will not only allow younger players to gain experience, but keep the veterans fresh when it matters most late in the season during the NCAA tournament. And that big regular season game against South Carolina and Dawn Staley. It's a necessity for the sustained success of this team. So here's the big question. How will Geno Auriemma manage this wealth of talent? I think for years, his rotations have been dictated by necessity rather than strategy. And now he has to figure out which combinations work best, which I think he is relishing because, he gets to figure out who complements whom, how to maximize everyone's potential without disrupting the team's chemistry. It's a challenge, but one that the all-time wins leader is, I'm sure, lucky to have. When we return, let's talk about Azzi and her return and how it is a wonderful, wonderful thing, both personally and professionally with her on the court. Right back. What's up, everybody? Let's get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. If you're a UConn fan, you've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Azzi Fudd is back after tearing her ACL and medial meniscus earlier last season. Fudd made her long-awaited return to the Huskies in their win over FDU. It wasn't a dominant performance. Fudd scored just 4 points in 12 minutes, but her mere presence on the court was enough to send a jolt of energy through the team and the fans. I saw more social media posts about Azzi than I think I've ever seen about any player in UConn history. So the anticipation of her has been one of joyous, cautious optimism. Fudd's return isn't just about adding another talented player to the rotation. It's about what she represents: resilience, determination, and the promise of what this UConn team can become. Let's not forget, Fudd was the #1 recruit in the class, a player hailed as the next great UConn star. Injuries have derailed and limited her to just 42 games in 3 years. It's crazy. But when she's healthy, she's a game changer. Her shooting, IQ, ability to space the floor make UConn exponentially more dangerous. It's like adding an all-star at the free agent deadline. I'm going to keep saying that. And she's coming a little earlier, which is great. The timing of her return couldn't be more perfect with a tough schedule ahead and the Baha Mar Women's Championship on the horizon. Fudd's presence gives UConn that dynamic edge that they were missing last season. Crazy. We say that and they went to the Final Four. Geno Auriemma spoke about how much Fudd's return means to the team, saying, quote, "She changes our team. She makes us better. With Azzi, we have the makings of a team that can compete for a championship." And I think he's correct. And it's not just about the numbers, though. Let's take a step back. Fudd's journey back to the court has been inspiring. She's endured multiple injuries, countless hours of rehab. She called it trauma bonding, but she never gave up between her and her teammates as she fought back to get to the court. That kind of perseverance sets the tone for the entire team. Her teammate, especially Paige, have rallied around her, and it's clear that her return has brought a renewed sense of optimism and energy to the locker room. Of course, it's going to take time for Fudd to get back to her best. Geno acknowledged that it won't happen overnight, but the potential is undeniable. When fully healthy, Fudd gives UConn a lethal weapon on both ends of the court. She can shoot from anywhere, defend multiple positions, create opportunities for her teammates. Her impact might not be fully realized in November or December, but come March, she could be the difference maker that pushes UConn over the top. So what does Fudd's return mean for the Huskies moving forward? For starters, it gives Geno the ability to play a true three-guard lineup alongside Beckers and KK Arnold. It also adds another layer to UConn's depth, allowing players like Aubrey Griffin and Caroline Ducharme to thrive in complementary roles if they come back from injury themselves. Could speed up the process where it doesn't have to be them coming back. It also gives the opportunity for rookies like Morgan Shelley and Ali Zabal to learn from a veteran like Azzi and see that perseverance shine through. And I think it gives UConn and Husky fans a renewed sense of hope. After years of adversity, UConn finally looks like a team that's whole again, as Geno called them. And with Fudd back in the mix, the sky's the limit. Before we get to the next segment, I think there's something that we need to talk about here, because we're going to go into this next segment and talk about how preposterous Geno's stats are. But before we get to that and go back to his amazing accomplishments, UConn is entering an era where they don't want to be currently. And what I mean by that is, when UConn was ascending, it was UConn and Tennessee. And Tennessee was here and UConn was here until they got to here and here and here, and then it started to flip. Now, it's not just a two-horse race the way it used to be. Although, one could argue it's South Carolina and everybody else. So UConn's in this hunting role. They're no longer the hunted. Do teams like Notre Dame and USC and Iowa State, teams that don't have the same pedigree as South Carolina does right now, are they going to be hunting UConn? For sure, because it's still a scalp and it's still a name. But you can't deny that UConn, they haven't dropped off, which is the craziest thing. They just haven't won titles. That's the standard at UConn. Final Four is great at UConn, but playing for a national championship and winning the national championship is what Geno Auriemma and his staff and Chris Daly and everybody has them poised to do year in and year out. So this team right now is literally at the precipice of, do they continue to ascend and knock off South Carolina from the pedestal, or do they kind of stay where they are and have South Carolina be up here again? And I think with the addition of Azzi, with the addition of Sarah, these great freshmen that are getting big minutes right now, but are going to probably give them spotty minutes as time goes on, but also still contribute. That three-guard rotation we talked about with KK. Can Caroline and Aubrey come back slowly but surely, but also not have to rush back because, team is pretty solid right now. And I think what Geno means by whole is now he gets to play his style of play. We had T. Baker on Friday talking about how, he's got the three pillars that he's used year in, year out. And you have to have a couple of scorers. You have to have a big, and you have to have really dynamic wing and guard play. And now he has all of that. One could argue the post presence is still in flux, but I use Sarah as an example. Sarah could do both. I think Jana's going to come along. She's going to be around in January and February, and Ice has looked really good. People made fun of me when I said Ice probably should start over Jana, but here we are. And that's where I think this team is. It is only going to get better as time goes on. I really can't wait till they face a tough opponent, and they might get a chance in that Baha Mar Classic because Oregon State's decent, but they'll win that game. And then if Ole Miss wins, which they should, UConn could get a potentially top 10, another top 12 team that they can get tested at before they even get into this really ridiculous stretch. So I'm really looking forward to that. And when we return, I want to talk about how preposterous Geno's win-loss record is. And we're going to juxtapose against a famous coach in the women's game how long it would take her to even get to 12-17, where we know Geno isn't going to stay. But just have some fun with me and play along. You're locked on. There's nothing like being at a live game. The buzz in the arena, the sound of sneakers squeaking on the court, the energy of the crowd that's in it for their team. whether it's spotting a celebrity courtside, like I saw Dave Benedict, or hearing a net swish in person. It's a totally different experience from watching it at home. And it's not just sports, concerts, comedy shows, theaters. They all hit differently when you're there live. Now, let me tell you about Game Time and their new Game Time Picks feature. That's changing the game for finding tickets. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff and shows you the only best deals that you want and great seats, making it easier than ever to catch your favorite events live. I used Game Time app recently, and let me tell you, it's so easy to check it out. I used it to get some friends tickets to the UNC, the Yukon versus Carolina basketball game, and found some amazing deals with the Game Time Picks. Super deal stood out. Top tier seats for way less than I expected. And the best part, the app shows you the view from your seat, so I could show my friends where they were going to sit. So no surprises. Game Time doesn't just stop at sports either. I also looked up tickets for a concert I've been dying to see. With their curated deals, I didn't have to sift through endless options. I went straight to the best prices for the best seats. Plus, their all-in pricing features shows your total upfront costs, so no hidden fees at checkout. That was for Teddy Swims, by the way, for my wife. Game Time also has your back with incredible protections, a lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Event cancellation protection, even job loss assurance. It's a peace of mind you won't get anywhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Don't wait. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. Just giving a beginning of the week perspective of where this team is now that it's whole, with Azzi back, with the depth that they have, with Sarah, with Morgan, with Allie, KK, Ashlyn, the whole deal. The team, Ice Brady doing a phenomenal job. Jana getting her licks in. She's going to be ready to go here shortly, meaning more playing time. And but last but not least, Geno Auriemma's record in perspective is crazy. Let's say the season ended today and UConn is the national champion and he has 1,217 wins. Let that number sink in for a moment. It's not just a record. It's literally a mountain of wins. He has less losses than the person that I'm going to compare him to in his career. His percentage is 88.3%. So it's just mind-boggling. The best winning percentage of any coach in history. So let's truly appreciate. Let's put it in perspective. And I'm going to compare him to one of the best coaches in college basketball right now, our buddy Dawn Staley, who I love. I think Dawn is a phenomenal coach. She's a Hall of Famer. Her record right now is 445 and 177. She's built South Carolina into the premier powerhouse program and has 2 national championships to her name in a 43-game winning streak. But here's the thing. At her current win rate, Staley would have to coach for 20 additional seasons, average 35 wins per year, when absolute maximum in today's game to even approach Geno is 12-17. She would be nearly 80 years old by the time she reached that mark. And so she'd have to be 35-4 most years and win national championship after national championship to even come close to this. Think about how preposterous that is. Dawn Staley, one of the best in the business, hasn't lost in 100 years. Would have to dominate for 2 more decades just to get in the same conversation as Geno from a wins perspective. And that's not a knock on her. It's a testament to how otherworldly Auriemma's achievements are. And before we get into even more, I posted this on Twitter/X about how he displays such true leadership that he has the humility to say the things that he says. Let's see if I can find it really quick. I'm not going to post it because I don't have time to put this up there. But he said, I said, the definition of greatness equals being self-aware enough to realize you can't do everything on your own. And in Geno's typical wry and dry fashion, there was a question very similar to mine when I asked him on Friday. And so, by the way, anybody asking those questions on the day he broke the record, you can thank me for probably why he's made this joke, which is that, the whole Chris Daly narrative, it's wearing itself thin, the story of how much CD means to me. I think we need to go in another narrative about how lucky she is to have been a part of me. Her biggest contribution is her clothing that she wants to wear on the sidelines. And then he smiled and he laughed and he said, that's obviously the joke, but the idea that then he flipped it around again and said, look, he also understands that if Chris wasn't around, he would have never been able to do the things he does, because he's knows exactly who to hire and who to associate himself with. And that's been his superpower. On top of the fact that he's a great coach and he's a great leader, he's been able to put himself in a position with people that make sense to him. And he's just been right all the time with that. And that I agree with 100%. So some people may not like Geno. They may not like the way he goes about his business. But what makes Geno's record even more remarkable is the consistency it represents. 40 seasons of this, he's averaged nearly 30 wins per year. He's built UConn into a dynasty, winning 11 national championships and producing countless WNBA stars. I think we had something like it was like 19 All-Americans, something crazy. It's probably more than that, but he's redefined what excellence looks like in basketball, setting a standard that may not be matched by anyone. So where does this leave us? Geno's record isn't just a number, it's a legacy. We love him. We want to thank him for his time, and I hope he gets to – how many more wins do we need to win a national championship? I think in the 1,250, get to that, and then we'll even be talking about more of this. So it'd be more like wins, 1,217 stories, 1,217 moments of triumph, and 1,270 reasons why Geno Auriemma is the greatest to ever do it. He is the GOAT for a reason, and he is truly, truly a presence. I'm glad to have covered him this year, and I'm super excited to see what he does with this team now that it's whole. Really appreciate everybody that's listening and following. That's today's episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember it's not just about getting it done, it's about doing it in a way it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day.